Hello everybody and welcome to today's Training Tuesday tutorial. This is Kate, one of your mentors here at Cole's Classroom, and I am coming to you today from bed with COVID, so excuse my voice. I am hopeful to get through this entire training in one cut, but if I have to cut it, then just know I was sneezing and coughing. That's the only reason why. All right, we're going to get started today, and I'm going to be showing you how to enhance golden hour glowy portraits. Now, I want to stress that the tips that I'm talking about in today's tutorial have to do with enhancing a golden hour glow that is already present in the photo. I stress this because I've seen some of these techniques be used on photos that are completely taken in overcast lighting with no sign of sun anywhere. And I personally feel like this isn't the best way to accomplish a natural look if you're working with a photo that is taken in a completely overcast setting. These techniques work best, in my opinion, to enhance portraits that were taken on a day when you already had some sun. Now, this can be really helpful even when there's only a glimmer of glowiness in the background. So right before the sun sets and you're just getting a tiny bit of glow on the horizon or one glimmer of sun through the trees, this will help to enhance that. It doesn't have to be a ton of sun, but I do find that there needs to be some golden glow present. I'm going to start by showing you my before and after here so that you can see how subtle this technique is, but also what a pop and just finishing touch it gives to the photo. So this is my before photo. Now, be mindful, this photo did have a preset applied to it, so it's not straight out of camera, but this is the before glow, meaning what the glow already looked like out of camera, but with the preset applied. And if you zoom in here, you'll be able to see the difference. You can see that in both photos, she does have a halo around the back of her head, and he does have a little bit as well here, although the tree is diffusing it. So you can see the halo is present in both, and the horizon does have some light leaking through, but you can see how much warmer and just softer and more present it is in my final edit than in the original image. So this is just to give you an idea of the fact that the original photo did have that glow already present. I didn't add that halo behind her head. That was a natural halo, and there was some light leak happening, but I did enhance all of that. Now, there are two steps that you can take to this. One step is to actually go ahead and grab an adjustment brush, and this would be a temperature brush to add some warmth, and you could add some highlight and even a little bit of exposure to enhance that halo around the head if you found that it was just not pronounced enough. And that would work like this. I would just go right around the edges. If you feel like it's too warm or it's standing out too much from the rest of her, you would just reduce the temperature here. And if you feel like you need a little bit more light leaking through, I would just up the highlights a little bit here. In this particular image, I feel like the natural halo was doing fine by itself, so I'm going to move on to step number 2, maintain that softness. I don't want an overly orangey warmth, I just want a nice, soft, warm, buttery light. So I'm going to go ahead and open the original photo with just the preset applied into Photoshop and show you step number 2. So here I have that photo, and step number 2 is going to be applying a sun flare overlay. I don't know for sure where I got these sun flare overlays because I've had them for quite a while, but my two main sources of overlays are Squeejoo.com and Etsy. If you're looking for more of a full-length tutorial on how to use overlays and layer masks in Photoshop, I do have a specific tutorial already created for that. So you can look for that in the training vault. Today is going to be just a very basic how to use overlays, and I'm going to be using sun overlays for these. Now, there's a few types of sun flare overlays that you can get. You have a corner sun flare overlay here, a centered sun flare overlay. This is the one that I usually use. And then you also have more of a light leak overlay, and that would look like this with the circles. I personally am not a fan of these light leak overlays, but it's a subjective creative choice. What is your style? So I most often will use either a centered sun flare overlay or a corner. For most compositions, I find the centered to work the best, even if you end up moving it toward the corner. I just find it to be the most universal. And I like this type where it's soft and feathered out. There's also a type where it's more of just the center part without the light leaking out of it, and it's just a warm, glowing circle. I just prefer this type for my portraits. So I'm going to select the entire thing by using Command A. If you're on a PC, you would use Control A. You can also do this by just grabbing the selection tool and, selecting the entire thing that way. And then I'm going to Command C to copy this layer. You could also Control C on a PC, and you can also go to Edit and Copy if you're not using shortcuts. I'm going to come back to my original image here, and I'm going to Command V to paste that layer on top. You could also Control V on a PC, and you can also edit paste if you're not using shortcuts. From here, I'm going to just make sure that sun flare layer is selected. I'm going to use my drop down to select screen. For most overlays, screen works the best. You can fiddle with the different options here, but I recommend screen for most of them. And as you can see now, I can drag this sun flare around. If I were to put it on a darker spot like the trees, it looks very artificial. But when I drag it to where the sun is already present, it becomes more natural. The further I drag it toward the horizon, the more those light leaks and feathering become present. And as I move it up into the more glowy sky, it becomes more subtle and more natural. I highly recommend placing the sun flare overlay where the light is already leaking through the most in your portrait. So for me, it would be this center spot right here, this little spot of trees where the sun is coming over it in this portrait, because the sun was quite low, so it was just leaking over the top of the horizon. It wasn't actually, pronounced through the trees or anything. So I would say the sun was down here. If the sun was higher at the time that I took the photo and it was clearly coming through the trees, like over here, I would find that spot where I can see the circular sun and that burst coming through the trees, and I would place it on top of that. I use this as a guide because I find it to be the most natural to place the flare where the sun is already appearing in the image, and this will also make sure that where your feathering is coming down onto your clients and adding extra sun to them, it's coming from the correct direction based on where the sun naturally would have been hitting them. So you could put it up here. They do have some sun on this side of their face and head. If I put it up here, you can see she does have some haloing on this side of her. But I know that the sun was mostly leaking through this spot in real life, so I feel most comfortable placing the sun behind them over there. And that will give me the most natural light hitting the back of her head and the front of his face here. You can see he doesn't really have any sun hitting him on this side, so if I were to move it up here, I would really need to enhance that halo around that side of his head in order to make it look natural. I feel most comfortable placing it up a little bit higher so that they have a golden glow coming, but I don't have as pronounced streams and lines of light coming here. But if you like that look, you absolutely could drag it down further here and capitalize on those feathered streams of light. So I'm going to move it up to about here. That's where I feel comfortable. Now, you're not done, because even if you go ahead and, leave your layer there, when you zoom in, which you always should, you're going to see that since this was a horizontal or landscape rectangular overlay, I do have a pretty firm line right here. I don't know if you can see that look on his pants, but you'll see a pretty firm line where my layer is cutting off and my photo is existing beneath it. And there's, no layer on top of it to be adding that golden warmth. So there's a hard line right here. Now, you could, basically increase the size of this layer and actually free transform. And so I don't have it selected. But you could actually free transform and expand the layer like this. But for me, that's adding so much glow to the image where I don't really want the entire image to be washed out by the glow. So I'm going to reduce it back to its original size here. And I'm going to use a different method of fixing that hard line. I'm actually going to create a layer mask, and this is how you're going to use most overlays. I'm going to go to layer mask, and I'm going to choose reveal all. If you choose reveal all, you're going to see the entire overlay present and you're going to brush off the parts that you don't want to appear. If you select hide all, the layer is going to go beneath your background. You're not going to be able to see it, and you're going to brush on the parts where you do want it to appear. You would use these differently just based on the overlay, but for this one, I want to see where the sun is hitting them, and I want to just brush off the parts where I don't want that hard line and maybe where I don't want as much of that sun on their faces and whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my brush tool, and I'm going to be using a black brush to brush off the parts I don't want. I'm going to get a fairly large and very soft brush, so around size maybe 500, right below. And I'm going to first start with a 100 opacity, and I'm going to go right along the edge of the overlay. And that's going to get rid of that harsh line. Because I'm using a very soft brush, my harsh line isn't going to be replaced with another harsh line where I'm brushing across the photo. It's going to be replaced with a much softer line and much less obvious. Now, my layer mask does go all the way up here to the top and sides of my image, which I can see over here on the layer, so I don't need to brush around them at the top. But if I had used a smaller overlay and there was a top to where my overlay ended with a harsh line, I would also go over that part like this. Now what I'm going to do is reduce the opacity that I'm brushing off at to about 50%, and I'm going to use that to just brush off the light, about half of the light, wherever I don't want as much of that hazy look to my image. So that's going to be somewhat their clothes, because I just personally don't want that like very hazy look, but it's totally up to you. This is very much a matter of style and opinion. And then I'm just going to reduce the opacity of my brush even more and just brush off their faces a little bit so that they're less hazy on their faces, and most of that haze is hitting the back of her head and their hair and leaking over the trees. Again, this is completely subjective and a matter of style, so you do this until you're happy with the image. I'm going to then pull back just to check that I like the final image, that I like as much sun that's leaking over the trees here and onto her hair, and that I'm happy with the amount of haze that's present over their faces and their clothes. If you like it, but you wanted to just reduce it a little bit, it was just a little bit too much sun for you, you could also reduce the opacity of the total layer, and you would do that over here. So you can see less glowy, more glowy, but it's leaving the light on the spots that I've brushed it on and off. It's just enhancing or decreasing that glow. So I'm going to leave it at 100%, and I would go ahead and Command S to save it back into Lightroom. You could also do this by going to File, Save, and then my image would appear back in Lightroom. Now, I already have the image here in Lightroom, so I'm going to go ahead and just show you that final image up close. So this is what the final image looks like in terms of the halo and the light leak, and then pulled back. This is the full view of the image. Sorry, there you go, working with my touchpad here. And then I am going to go ahead and just show you that before and after again, next to each other. So less glowy, but does have a natural glow, much more glowy and warm and enhanced, but still soft and beautiful. I hope that this tutorial was helpful to you. Again, I highly recommend using this to enhance portraits that were already taken on a glowy evening, but just need a little bit more of that sun glowy pop in the background versus a photo taken on a completely overcast day. If you do need any more help with using overlays in Photoshop or layer masks in Photoshop, do check out our Training Vault for further, more detailed tutorials on that. I hope this Training Tuesday was helpful to you, and I can't wait to see your glowy golden hour images. Thanks for joining me. Bye!